What's up, Meta Nerds? This video is all about the MTT, the Multi-Troop Transport. In some ways, this is one of the most important vehicles in the CIS Army because it's one of the major ways that it got its troops into battle. It was manufactured by Factoid Armor Workshop, the same company that brought us the B-1 battle droids and the armored assault tank. And just like the tank, this transport also uses repulsor lift technology. It was 31 meters long or 101 feet, making it about as long as 1.5 ATTEs. And at 13 meters or 42 feet tall, it was the same height as this statue of Athena, or about 1.5 TIE fighters. This great size made it pretty slow, with a top speed of only 35 kilometers per hour, or about 21 miles per hour, which is a little weird because that's the top speed of the much larger SPHA, which had to crawl around on 12 walker legs, where this thing gets to hover around with its repulsor lift. But what is very interesting is that this repulsor lift allowed it to go up to 4 meters, or 13 feet up in the air, allowing it to easily glide over most battlefield debris. In this cross section, we can see that the battle droid pilot and gunner both sit up on the very top. During the Battle of Naboo, the MTTs there were all set on pre-programmed tracks, but the B-1 battle droid pilot could consult with the droid control ship if it wanted to deviate from the path laid out by the commanders. It also had 2 other battle droids on staff, both of which operated the racks. This ingenious system was 2 large racks that each deployed into 2 separate rows, making 4 rows in total, which could carry 112 B-1 battle droids, or 20 droidekas. Later in the Clone Wars, they had the option to carry in 12 super battle droids. These racks were all pushed forward by a drive engine located at the rear of the MTT. And it's the rear of this vehicle which also houses all the repulsor lift technology. And it's really interesting to point out that its power generators come from Kuat Drive Yards, the company that made almost all of the vehicles used by the Republic. If we look really close on the undersection of the MTT, we can see the repulsor lift's cooling fins. Battle droids would have to make sure that these things never get clogged up, because moving a vehicle of this size generated a massive amount of heat from the repulsor lifts, and the pilots always had to be sure that the enemy never attacked them from the rear, as that is where the weaker armor was, and it was the location of pretty much all of its important systems. Now it's important to keep in mind that the MTT was just meant to transport troops, so usually it was escorted into battle at least by armored assault tanks, but it also carried some weapons on board. A pair of twin blaster cannons located in ball turrets. These ball turrets allowed it to aim in different directions, but because of how they were mounted, it still didn't have that wide of a firing arc, though they were pretty powerful, with each bolt firing an equivalent of 17 kilowatts. But perhaps its greatest offensive weapon was simply the fact that you could use it as a battering ram. The front of the MTT is heavily armored, and in certain spots it's studded with even thicker armor. This is especially true around those front rounded parts, and this allowed the pilot to use the MTT to blow through buildings, defenses, or even other vehicles. This feature helped to complement the fact that it deploys the troops forward, and so what the MTT could do is punch a hole in a wall, then it would open the rounded hatch, and slip in 112 B-1 battle droids. This tactic was used throughout the Clone Wars, and the updated versions of the MTT that carried in droidekas and super battle droids were developed later in the war as the needs arose. Some CIS leaders came up with interesting uses for the MTT, like when Wat Tambor used them to ship his personal treasures. Later in the Clone Wars, Factoid Armor Workshop made some other troop deployment vehicles, like the Platoon Attack Craft and the Multi-Utility Transport. With the defeat of the CIS Army at the end of Episode 3, we don't see any more from the MTT. Unlike some other vehicles, we don't see these being used by the Imperials, or even being picked up by pirates, or other criminal organizations. So this is where the multi-troop transport history ends, but before you go, I definitely want to go over some cool facts and some behind-the-scenes stuff. Some leadership in the CIS complained that the MTT racks took too long to deploy B-1 troops. Because they had to unfold, it was very dramatic on film, but they thought it was impractical for the battlefield. So some MTT variants had racks which could deploy the B-1s in an already upright position. It looks a little funny to see them packed in there this way, and it did reduce the total amount of troops that could be carried, but it also meant they didn't have to wait for the B-1s to get out of their yoga pose. The original name for the MTT was the Maxi Troop Transport, and George Lucas's original description was that he wanted a huge vehicle that resembled a train that could just plow through the battlefield and blow through anything in its path. In this concept art, you can see the similarities between the MTT we have today, but it definitely looks a lot more like a train. The final version of the MTT that we know and love today came because one of the artists decided to incorporate some animal aspects, thinking that with Lucas's want for it to charge and plow things over, he could make it kind of look like an elephant. And some of the design features that were changed were to give it a high forehead and to put the gun turrets on the bottom to try and resemble tusks. And it's said that Factoid Armor Workshop had a hard time thinking outside of the box at first. Being so used to making things for organics, when they started to make things for the droid army, they started to realize that they could really take advantage of the space inside these vehicles, making these droids even more compact by squishing them down and stuffing them all next to each other. Something that you could never do with organic troopers. Factoid Armor Workshop was able to cram a lot more into this thing. In our galaxy, the MTT has appeared in the 2001 video game Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, and in different LEGO Star Wars games. Of course, it will also be in the 2017 Battlefront 2 video game. But that's it for the Multi-Troop Transport, or the MTT. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button, and be sure to leave a comment down below if I missed any cool facts, or if you have a suggestion for future videos. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MetaNerdsLore, so you can see us build Star Wars props and cosplays, along with some other cool Star Wars stuff. If you want to help support this channel, check out the description below for our Amazon store and our Patreon. And be sure to subscribe, because we're making videos like this every single day. But most important of all, remember, always keep your droids in the upright and locked position, and the Force will be with you. Always.